Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the UK Government and Welsh Government webinar on the EU transition. My name is Robert Lloyd-Griffiths, and I'm the National Director for the Institute of Directors here in Wales. And can I, first of all, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here today. I will be acting as chair and compere for the webinar. Let me explain to you the agenda for the session, which will last approximately 45 minutes. We will be joined and we'll be hearing from the Secretary of State for Wales, Simon Hart, and the Welsh Government Minister for the Economy and Transport, Ken Skates. And we'll be hearing about the wider context for the end of transition and what businesses need to do to be ready. Both ministers will then answer questions, but the ministers will have to leave, unfortunately, by noon. And following that, we will hear a brief presentation from Matthew Clark, who is the head of UK Customs, Excise and International Trade at PwC, about the practical actions businesses need to take for transition, followed by a brief Q&A with him. Can I just take you through a little bit of housekeeping? We have the opportunity to ask questions directly to the Secretary of State and to the Minister, and the way to do that is beneath the video. You'll be able to join via the chat mechanism. So underneath your video screen, you will see the chat mechanism. Put your name into the mechanism there. You need to accept terms and conditions, then hit enter, and then you are good to go. So ladies and gentlemen, we have over 300 businesses logging in today, which is great, and we'll aim to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar, but apologies in advance if we don't get through them all. We will certainly address them and use them in the usual channels for you to see the answers to them. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce the Secretary of State for Wales. And may I also remind you to put your questions to him or Minister Skates into the chat for questions which will follow the Secretary of State. Secretary of State, good morning.
Robert, thank you. Good morning, and welcome everybody on the call as well. I know these things are time consuming, but we're incredibly grateful for everybody's interest, engagement, patience as we get into some very interesting times for everybody on the call. Can I start also by thanking Ken Skates for being on the call with me today. I think it's really important that I stress how collaborative and how cooperative the relationship I think is, particularly with Ken and Welsh Government. Even before COVID, we have regular, probably nearly weekly calls about a whole range of issues. And it's frustrating, I know, for people on the call to see a constant sort of media dialogue, which is based on disagreement and hostility and that kind of relationship. In reality, we actually probably agree on 7 out of 10 things which we're all trying to achieve, and particularly around COVID and, of course, the end of the transition period. So I think it is perfectly to be expected, and I hope welcomed by everybody on the call, that Welsh Government and UK Gov are together and collaborating as far as we possibly can on these issues. Obviously, the first question people on people's lips at the moment is what are the state of negotiations? This sort of building of momentum around and speculation around what's going to happen, when the deadline really is, and what the outcome might look like. I'm not going to be able to say how or even when it's going to end or in what form. What I can say is really what we've all already know is it's got to a very, very challenging stage. There are some substantial outstanding matters of principle, which at the moment it seems quite difficult to see a way through. But as I've often said on these calls and in public before, there is nothing unusual in any negotiation of this scale for there to be what appears to be immovable objects, particularly as the clock ticks quite quickly towards what has to be a sort of final stage of discussions, either over this weekend or over the next week or so. We really are now getting towards that sort of 1 minute to midnight moment. And so anybody on this call who's been involved in negotiations will know that there will be moments of despair, moments of optimism, but that it will all go to the wire. and this is no exception. However, where these webinars, and we've done a few now, have been very useful, is we've been able to, I hope, signpost people towards help that they might not know exists, or certainly be able to deal with queries which are perhaps not immediate, solutions which might not be immediately obvious. What we're also able to do is say, look, this isn't the only moment that you can engage with UK government. You can come to the Wales office at any time, and I'm sure Ken's department would be equally welcome. We are here to try and make sure that this complicating and challenging process is as easy as possible, particularly for businesses which might not have massive resource and who've had their hands full with trying to deal with a unbelievably challenging year thanks to COVID, and frankly haven't got the bandwidth to necessarily deal with another big set of challenges like those which face us at the moment. So the first point I want to make is this: preparations need to be made for the end of the transition period, whether there is a deal or not. We need to slay the myth that these preparations only need to be made in the event of one or other outcome. Most of the preparations need to be made irrespective of what the outcome is. The second thing is, and I quote from sort of previous seminars and webinars that we have, is business in Wales, as we see it, consists really of three categories. A category where businesses are frankly not prepared at all, and possibly should be. A category where businesses are partially prepared, but there is probably more work to be done. And then a category which is businesses which are totally prepared and ready for whatever the 1st of January may throw at them. Now, the good news is that each of categories 1 and 2 are moving slowly towards category 3, and in some cases quickly towards category 3. So the campaign, the publicity campaign, the messages are getting out there, preparations are being made, and as I say, those first two categories where further work's needed are getting smaller, and more importantly, moving in to a proper state of readiness. Now, unsurprisingly, larger businesses tend to be further down that road than smaller businesses. And I think it's a good moment really to thank a number of people, a number of the sort of bigger enterprises in Wales, particularly, and I use this example for good reason, Aerospace Wales and Airbus, who've actually also stepped forward to offer their own assistance to businesses and have conducted their own seminars for businesses, because they've been through this process, they've made the preparations, they know what the pitfalls and opportunities are, and they've been able to share best practice. So actually this has been a very team effort, not just of government, but also of business as well. And of course, all of the membership organisations, whether it's the FSB, CBI and others, have been brilliant in assisting in the process of getting that preparation to the best possible place. Then, of course, there are, and I'll finish any second now, the gov.uk websites, which have been a useful source in registering increased traffic literally every hour of every day of people as they make use of those resources, helplines, and of course, just the information that you can pick up on the fringes by emailing my colleagues here in the Wales office or emailing colleagues in Welsh Government on niche but nonetheless very important aspects of preparation. And just one thing, if I may, I just want to end, because it is relevant in this context, is where we are on COVID. Ken may have something to add on this, and I think that I don't think any of us can underestimate the huge impact this dreadful pandemic has on every aspect of our lives, business or otherwise, over the last few months. And I think the next year will be unquestionably different. And the rollout of the vaccine is going to see the thank goodness, medical interventions replacing societal and lockdown interventions in a gradual and measured and safe way as we go through the year. It's not all going to miraculously get better on in the early part of the year. There's a lot of potential pitfalls along the way, but that will change the shape of the economy, will change the shape of what we're able to do locally and nationally during the course of next year. It is unquestionably the most fantastic news, with lots of caveats. And amidst that fantastic news is the fact that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, when it is approved by the regulators, will be manufactured by a company based in Wrexham, which is, I think, good to see a Welsh company leading the world, let alone the UK, in our fight back against this unwelcome visitor. So, Robert, I think that's all I had. Very happy to take questions in the very limited time I'm annoyed that we seem to have for you. But as I say, we can have conversations outside this webinar for those who wish to have further information and engagement. So thank you all very much indeed for your patience and resilience.
Thank you very much indeed, Secretary of State, for that. And there will be a chance for questions. And those of you on this webinar, please do submit it in the chat mechanism, which I explained earlier. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Ken Skates, who is the Welsh Government Minister for the Economy and Transport. Minister.
Oh, Robert, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. It really is. And I'm really pleased to be joined by the Secretary of State for Wales, Simon Hart. And I'd echo what Simon said regarding the collaboration that's taken place between himself, myself, his office, my office, over many, many months. We're always keen to work together in common unity wherever possible, and that's why we issued that joint letter to businesses recently. That's why we're participating in discussions such as this, because we appreciate that what you want to see from governments is collaboration and unity and unison rather than discord and petty politics, and that's why Simon and I are very keen to work together whenever and wherever possible. And of course, over the last 18 months, in Welsh Government, we've provided additional investment available to companies to train staff to explore options and to navigate some of the challenges that we'll face as we reach the end of the transition period. And I very much agree with what Simon was saying about the dual challenge of the end of the transition period coming with COVID. This has been a terrible, terrible year. And so I completely understand when I hear business leaders say that there simply isn't the bandwidth to be able to deal with both of these challenges at the same time. And that's why we're so keen as governments to assist wherever we possibly can. We've made available recently £100 million in development grant funding for businesses that are looking at post-COVID, post-transition life and opportunities. And I'd certainly advise all businesses to access online information that's available both from the UK government and from Business Wales, which is supported by the Welsh government. Wales advisors are also available to respond to specific queries via the helpline. They also have access to trade advisors who may be able to assist you in matters concerning imports and exports. But I'm keen to hear, as always, of any suggestions that you might have as to how we can improve our support to businesses at this critically important time. And of course, once we know the outcome of trade discussions between the UK government and the EU, we'll be able to then tailor, finesse and shape our support accordingly to businesses as we look towards 2021.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, for that. There are a few questions coming in on the chat mechanism. The first question is from a business located just off the A55 in Conway. We export weekly to Ireland. Given the lack of customs facilities at Holyhead, our loads will now need to double back to Warrington or Birmingham and increase shipping costs. Will you offer any financial support?
Yeah, I didn't catch the name of the business, but I caught the nature of the business. I think the arrangements at Holyhead. I was on a Zoom call yesterday afternoon about preparations around Holyhead. Timescales tight, absolutely right, but I'm not aware at this moment in time that it is. That there is any recognition that that is definitely going to be the case in January. There is significant preparations being made around a specific site which has been identified and agreed. There is discussion between Ken and UK government about who becomes the sort of freehold owner of that site and the infrastructure which needs to be put in place by July of next year. And I think I've got some quite reassuring, I won't say very reassuring, but quite reassuring noises yesterday about preparedness for that. But Ken may be able to add some, put some icing on that cake. I don't know.
Minister?
Sure, yeah. I recently issued in the last few days a written statement and a press release that should be available if you Google the Welsh Government communication pages, should be online, which identifies some of the solutions that we're going to be working to as we reach the end of the year. regarding haulage facilities, the infrastructure that needs to be in place. There are two critical points. There's obviously January the 1st, and then there's July as well. And so we're working towards ensuring that any drivers that arrive at Holyhead without the appropriate paperwork have the ability to be able to park up whilst they acquire the relevant paperwork. Obviously, this has been a huge undertaking, a very, very significant undertaking. We've been keen to work with local authority, with the Isle of Anglesey Council, but that information now is available in the form of a written statement and a press release on the Welsh Government pages. In terms of compensation, we've been keen to develop funding systems that enable businesses to future-proof themselves, and that's why we made available that £100 million of development grant funding. And we're going to be looking at, in the new year, further support for businesses as they look towards opportunities, growth potential, resilience, in the context of us having left the customs union and the single market. So I'd urge businesses, again, if they haven't yet signed up to Business Wales, to do so, because you'll be getting regular updates on those funding packages.
Thank you, Minister. Next question that's coming in. We are 3 weeks away from the end of the transition, and as exporters of food, we still do not have finality of the documents and processes for export to the EU. Are they to be forthcoming, or where should they seek to obtain these documents? Secretary of State.
Gov.uk website, I think, is useful, but it might not have a specific answer for every different possible scenario. What I would suggest in that instance is that that the particular contributor emails us or rings us direct in the Wales office, and we will direct them to the correct information. That's exactly one of the things that we can, between us and Welsh Government, do.
Thank you. And Minister, I'm assuming that a similar response, really, in terms of finding the relevant information for those important documents will be available from Welsh Government by Business Wales as well?
Yeah, with signposting to the appropriate UK government sites, absolutely, yes.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Another question that's come in. Obviously, today is a prime example of cooperation between two governments. Are we likely to see more cooperation between the UK and Welsh Government around the transition?
Well, I certainly hope so. This is one of the greatest challenges that we've faced as a nation, as the United Kingdom. So it's important that we all work towards the same ends. And what I think all governments wish to do is to ensure that the economy of the United Kingdom is resilient and strong, and that we explore all opportunities in the context of whatever agreement, hopefully there will be an agreement, comes. And so, it's my belief that we work better in the interests of the public and the interests of the business community when we put our shoulders to the wheel in the same direction. And so I'm keen to make sure that wherever possible, I work with Simon and other counterparts in UK government in a collaborative manner. There will always be, as Simon's identified, there will be areas where there is not agreement, but we've always been keen, I think Simon and myself, to focus on those areas where we can work together, and in so doing improve prospects for citizens in Wales and for businesses in Wales.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think the other way I look at this is that, what are our common aims? Our common aims are jobs and livelihoods in Wales. It's supporting the areas of Wales which are most challenged. It's about as a creation, it's about encouraging inward investment, and so those are areas where we have common ground. Now, the means by which we might achieve those and the necessary financial levers that we might have to pull in order to create the best possible. So those are subjects of often quite intense debate and in some cases disagreement. But the aims remain the same. And I think there's another observation in this, which I found interesting in my conversations with Ken over the months and years, which is about not getting too strung up on political regions and looking actually at economic regions and how we can look at the UK and the rest of the world as a whole, rather than get, as I say, too sidetracked by right, this is Wales, therefore it's territory occupied only by Welsh government, or this is the northwest of England territory only occupied by UK government. We all know that actually the economic sustainability of North Wales is interlinked, for example, with Merseyside and northwest England, the same way as the economy of southeast Wales is interlinked with parts of the southwest of England and Swindon, Reading, and London and beyond. And so I think where Ken and my thinking has always been, it's been to look at it like that, and not, as I say, look at a big red line that separates Wales and the rest of the UK politically or geographically. And I hope that gives people some comfort that we aren't always just looking at areas to disagree. We're actually looking at areas where we can find common ground and achieve common interests.
Thank you very much, Secretary. I know listeners will be reassured by that comment. The next question that's coming through is, 80% of our business is conducted in Europe for a French company. We send our staff members regularly to mainland Europe to deliver the contract. We will now need to work, will we now need visas for our staff to enable them to work abroad? Minister, do you want to come in that one first?
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. So if you travel to the EU for work purposes after the 31st of December of this year, you may well need to have a visa or a work permit. And in order to find out whether you do need one, I'd very much urge a business or an employee to visit gov.uk transition to discover whether that is the case. These sort of suggestions were captured in that letter that the Secretary of State and I issued just recently, offering practical advice for some of the most pertinent and pressing questions that businesses have been raising with us. So in this instance, gov.uk transition.
Thank you very much, Minister. Secretary, is there anything you wish to add to that?
No, other than clearly we want to try and make this as painless and seamless as possible. It'll take a little bit of getting used to, but Ken's information is actually absolutely right.
The next question is can you foresee any devolution issues when it comes to Brexit? I wonder whether they're referring to constitutional issues, but is there anything that immediately springs to mind, Secretary of State, when you hear that question?
There probably is, and this could be the subject of a day-long webinar in its own right. But there is unquestionably a discussion going on at the moment around, and forgive the jargon, the Shared Prosperity Fund. That's the money that was currently flowing into Wales and the UK through EU structural funds, and which will be gradually replaced by UK Gov funding. And that does pose some interesting challenge and also fantastic opportunities in my view. I look at it through very sort of glass half full sort of prism, because I think for the first time for a long time we're going to actually be able to have much more sort of democratic accountability about not only the quantum but also the use to which it is put. I think the discussion, I hope this is said in the best possible spirit. I think at the moment there is there's a little tension between Welsh Gov and UK Gov about where the sort of devolution boundaries lie. We're adamant that this doesn't impact adversely on the devolution settlement, and it's actually an opportunity to add to the normal funding mechanisms from which Wales benefits, i.e. the Barnett formula. This gives us the opportunity to provide additional spending capacity, particularly on big ticket things like infrastructure, where perhaps Barnett is never quite enough. Barnett is sort of a bit rigid and doesn't quite allow for those big ticket items to be addressed in a particularly constructive way. So we've got, I think, it's probably fair to say we've got quite a long way to go on this discussion yet, and we're trying again. I'm mainly dealing with Jeremy Miles, Ken's colleague on this, and the FM, in fact. And this is not going to be easy, but in a way, it is a nice problem to have, because we're talking about many millions of pounds, which we want to spend constructively in Wales and collaboratively, if at all possible.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Minister, is there anything you would wish to add to the Secretary of State's comments?
Well, conscious of time, and I'd agree with Simon that we could spend days debating constitutional issues in the context of the end of the transition period and what may come after December the 31st. And there are also many moving parts as well. So there's consideration of the Shared Prosperity Fund. There's also the Union Connectivity Review, which is hugely important in terms of infrastructure and for our part, particularly rail infrastructure. And then there are concerns regarding replacement EU funding frameworks that we put together as well. Obviously, there are disagreements right now. We hope that we can overcome disagreements, but in order to do justice to this debate, we probably need a fortnight, I'm afraid, Robert, and instead we've only got 4 minutes.
We have indeed. Yes, we have indeed. So I'm going to keep the last question very brief and probably just a single couple of sentences answer. How would any UK-EU trade deal help in reducing burdens on business? I'll come to you first, Secretary of State, and then to you, Minister.
Last question is always the hardest, isn't it? I think the way we are looking at trade deals with the ones we struck with Japan, Canada, Singapore yesterday, although to some extent it's difficult to see exactly how that's going to impact positively on each and every business on this call, I think it gives us a flavour for what is possible as far as the EU is concerned. But I think it's also worth pointing out that the absence or indeed the presence of a trade deal with the EU doesn't necessarily alter the fact that we will continue to be trading with our nearest bloc partners, but just maybe trading in a different manner. My guess is, and I've said this right from the outset, is I think the standards that will exist, whether they're animal welfare standards or manufacturing standards, whatever it might be, between us and our European Union, 27 remaining member states, will actually probably remain absolutely in line with the current arrangements. I don't see there's going to be much of a sort of change in all of that.
Thank you. And Minister?
Well, one of the reasons why I was strongly opposed to the UK leaving the EU is because of the additional bureaucracy and administration that would be dumped on businesses. So I'm afraid I can't really offer any positive or optimistic outlook regarding this particular issue. When you look at challenges that have already been raised today, there will be additional bureaucracy administration. We can't escape from that. The debate was had several years ago and the public made their mind up on this. And so what we need to do now is work together as governments with the business community to try to minimise the impact of additional bureaucracy and administration on businesses. And that's why we're so keen to do events such as this.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister, and thank you, Secretary of State, for being with us today. Thank you for answering the questions. And we know that you have to hop off to other meetings, but we're very grateful for your time this morning. And no doubt we'll be hearing from you in the weeks ahead, each of you and each of the governments, both in Westminster and Cardiff Bay. Once again, thank you both very much indeed. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Matthew Clark from PwC, who will be giving a presentation on practical actions that businesses need to take to prepare for transition. Matthew, you're very welcome.
Morning, Robert, and good morning, everyone. So I think we've got 5 to 10 minutes to discuss trading across the new border from the 1st of January. If you trade internationally already, you may be familiar with moving goods across a customs border and therefore submitting customs declarations. But there's many businesses that have not traded internationally before and won't be familiar with customs declarations, only the very simple data set that goes on a VAT invoice. A customs declaration does contain a more complex set of data requirements, not least things like a customs classification code for your goods, which needs to be at a 10-digit numerical level, not the 8-digit numerical level that VAT traders are used to when filling in their Intrastat returns. And there's various other data sets that are on there. You've also got to think about how to value your goods when they come across this border. And that can be relatively simple. If you're buying from a third party, you would base that on your purchase price with the insurance and freight to move it to the UK. But can be a little bit more complex when you're trading with businesses that you're related to and you have transfer pricing adjustments, or there are royalties and other fees that you have to pay between yourself and your supplier. All those things come together to determine how much duty would be applicable on your goods. So I thought it'd be quite useful in the first instance to start off by recapping some of the major changes that are coming with respect to moving goods across this new border. And these are all, as the Minister pointed out before, published on the gov.uk website. So let's have a think about this. So two main changes to begin with for Welsh businesses importing and exporting from the EU. And obviously, if there are any other UK businesses as well, it would apply to them. So the first big change is that we have a new UK global tariff. This tariff determines the customs duty rate that's payable on goods imported into the UK from the 1st of January 2021. And I think the good news for importers is that the new tariff rates are typically slightly lower than the EU tariff rates that we're used to using if you've imported into the EU before from third country. Now, apart from these new customs duty rates, little will change for those businesses already importing and exporting from the UK to countries outside the EU. So say if you trade with Asia or the US or Canada. The only real change to them would be if we lose access to an EU free trade agreement with these countries. But the UK is continuing, as the Minister said, to push forward with our own agreements. We signed a new free trade agreement with Japan, which is slightly more favourable than the rates that we have under the EU existing agreement, and negotiating with other countries are ongoing. In relation to the EU deal, it looks as if this morning that we should know by the end of the week whether that will be reached or not. But I do want to make it clear, because there's a little bit of confusion on what a free trade agreement will actually give us. The main impact of a free trade agreement, if it happens, is that it could reduce the customs duty payable on goods that are from the UK or from the EU traded between us. It wouldn't alleviate the need to submit customs declarations to move your goods across the new border with the EU, or for Welsh businesses between Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and Wales. So that's something that I do want to make really clear. So the second big change is in terms of the border operating model. Now, this again has been published on the gov.uk website, so I'm going to give you some highlights on that. And this is really to impact those bringing goods in from the EU, so from Ireland into Wales, for example. And to be absolutely clear, that takes effect from the 31st of December at 11 p.m. I know it's very nuanced, but bear with me on that. If you do ship goods after 11 p.m, you are into the new rule. So just be aware in case there's any last shipment scheduled for New Year's Eve. So the border operator model will impact all businesses moving goods from the EU into the UK that haven't traded internationally before. For goods exported to the EU, so if you're moving goods into the Republic of Ireland or into the EU mainland, then customs declarations are required from the 1st of January, and that's full declarations from day one to get the goods out. So that's for export. For import, it's slightly different, and this is where this phased border comes into effect. So customs declarations will either be required from the 1st of January 2021 for controlled goods, and you can check the controlled goods list on the gov.uk website to see if your goods are included in that or not. So some examples are excise goods. If the goods are alcohol, tobacco or oil related, that's an example of a controlled good. So on that, from the 1st of January, you will need to complete customs declarations for inbound goods if they're on that controlled goods list type. If you aren't on the controlled goods list, then you have the option, should you wish, to delay the submission of customs declarations to HMRC for non-control goods until the 1st of July 2021. And there are some additional licensing requirements that will kick in for inbound goods from the 1st of April. So that's like food licensing, veterinary certificates and things like that. Now, it is important to note on that many businesses are actually choosing not to delay their declarations, because that in itself could present difficulties. By delaying your declaration, what you'd have to do is build up a data set for your customs declarations for all your movements in January, for example, and they will be submitted alongside your imports for July. So you'll basically be declaring 2 months worth of imports in the single calendar month, and that will continue until January 2022, when you will have caught up on those first 6 months of goods will have been declared. So that's the phased border implementation. I do think if you're going to take advantage of that 6-month deferral, you've got to be really sure that you can keep that data set ready. Because of course, if you're trying to recreate a customs data set for a declaration 6 months in arrears, I think that would be very, very difficult for businesses to do. And I think one of the things that you have to consider as well is you've got to get your customs data to your customs broker in the right hands at the right time to effect clearance for you. Now, typically, businesses that have used customs brokers in the past, you're used to having goods on the high seas for several weeks if it's coming over from Asia or from the US. We can have them over in a matter of hours from Ireland, into Wales, or from EU into the UK, especially if the Channel Tunnel is being used. So you do have to ensure that you can collate that data quickly, get it into an agreed template with your customs broker, send them over the supporting documentation for clearance, things like your purchase invoice, any additional licensing or supporting documentation that they may require in order to effect your clearance. So I was asked by Robert to focus on some of the basics of what we can do in the time that's left. And I think it's really useful to refer back to HMRC's 9-point action list. Now, they sent this out to all VAT registered traders in the UK on the 9th of September, but you can actually find that on the gov.uk website as well. So let's just think about some of the things that are on that list and pick out some of those key actions. So the first one is to ensure that you have all the relevant tax approvals that you need. So on this call, we're focusing very much on Welsh business. So from an inbound perspective, you'll be VAT registered already, and you should have a GB URI number already because they were automatically issued to every VAT registered business. You'll need both of those to import. Some of the other things that you may wish to consider is, would you like your own duty deferment account? Now, that will allow you to post customs duty and import that if payable, if you're not using the new postponed accounting regime, to that account, so you don't have to pay it immediately when your goods land in the country. Now, that deferment account, you can either have one yourself, which may be an option, you might want to do that, or if you don't feel that you have the volume or you're not posting a high value of customs duty to a deferment account, you may wish to ask your customs broker, do they have a deferment account that you are able to post your duty to? So basically that would mean that your duty is accounted against that deferment account, and then mid-month of the following month after importation, it's actually taken from that account by direct debit. And again, have one yourself or speak to your customs broker. They might be able to provide one for you. I think one of the other things that is really key on that action list is to understand the classification of your goods. So that's that 10-digit numerical code that I referred to earlier. You might be familiar with an 8-digit code for the VAT system that you're used to putting on your Intrastat returns, but it's to get it up to 10 digits. So do look at that new UK Global Tariff. Speak to your broker, speak to a customs duty consultancy like ourselves or another provider to help you with that, to make sure you've got it right. And that classification is really key, because not only does it determine the customs duty rate that's applicable to your goods, but it also will determine whether there are other supporting documentation, such as additional licensing for food and things like that, that you have to clear your goods on importation. And it's that commodity code for your goods that you'll use to check whether your goods are on the controlled goods list and whether you can actually do import declarations from the 1st of January, or you can delay it till the 1st of July. So checking the classification and checking when you have to do declarations is absolutely key. And I think the last point for me on this is really speak to everyone within your supply chain. So speak to your logistics agents, speak to your customs broker, make sure everyone knows what they need to do and that they've got that data in a relevant time frame to affect your clearance and not stop your supply chain from moving. The other thing is to ascertain and agree with either your supplier or your customer what is the Incoterms that you are following for that movement of goods across the border. Now, they're absolutely key because they will determine what role you or your supplier or customer has to play in that movement. So who is the exporter, who is the importer, and where does risk sit and who is going to do what? And those Incoterms should be aligned to your purchase or supply contract. And getting those key is really essential. If there's a misalignment or a misunderstanding between yourselves and another supply chain partner, that can hold up goods at the border, because you might be expecting them, for example, to export it from the EU, but they wouldn't do if you were purchasing on X works terms. They would expect you to, or you might be expecting them to deliver duty paid, and then they turn around and say, as a non-established business, we can't import the goods into the UK, so you would need to. So talking through the nuances of those Incoterms is really, really key. And if you have the time left, it's quite useful to test that customs clearance process with some test transactions. So speak to your broker, make sure that data's right, and that might highlight any potential errors that could occur from the 1st of January, and you might be able to solve those before you begin trading across the new border. So Robert, that's really a recap from me. I hope that was useful. I'm open to taking Q&A questions now, if you'd like to pose those to me from the audience. First question, we are set up for an EORI, but would like to see what changes will be made to the electronic paper trail through the ports. I think that's really something that you'll need your customs broker to help you with. So you've got an EORI and you're VAT registered, that's perfect. That's what you need to actually put your customs declaration in, or your customs broker to do that on your behalf. Your customs broker should make the electronic submission for your declarations on your behalf. If there is additional documentation that may be required for your goods, your customs broker should bring that to your attention, and you should get your goods cleared, and then that will obviously be given back to you. So the completed customs declaration, you should get that back from your broker as a completed set and documentation pack.
Okay, the second question. Sorry, the second question. As an importer from the EU and also an exporter to the EU and beyond, what are the timelines for actions that companies will have to adopt for either a deal or no deal outcome?
Thanks, Robert. So at the moment, the only thing that will change is whether we have a free trade agreement or not. So come the 1st of January, if you're exporting goods between the UK and the EU, you will need to complete customs declarations. That will not be affected by a free trade agreement. From an inbound perspective, that inbound movement, you may have to complete customs declarations from day one, from the 1st of January, or you might be able to delay them until the 1st of July, depending on whether you use controlled goods or not. The difference with a free trade agreement is, if we have one with the EU, there's two things that could potentially help businesses with. One is it could reduce the customs duty that they have to pay when goods land. But in order to do that, you'll have to ensure that the goods qualify or originate from the EU or the UK. And there's normally documentation that is required to prove that in a form of a preference certificate, or we could have a supplier invoice statement on the actual purchase invoice that you get from them. So that's the only really key difference in terms of that documentation.
So a final question, Matthew, is the harmonization code required for export paperwork 10 digits long or 8-digit commodity codes?
For both import and export, Robert, it will be 10 digits. What's quite helpful is we saw a publication from HMRC last week, or a statement of policy, to say that the 10-digit codes that people are used to if they import and export into the UK and the EU will continue to be accepted by the HMRC system from January. We weren't quite clear if they were going to create their own tariff numbers, but they've aligned them, so that will make it easier for businesses to follow.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Matthew. I think the key thing is for businesses across Wales to find out as much information as they can, and that's certainly the message from both the Secretary of State and also the Minister for Business earlier. And I know that you've alluded to some of the websites available, especially the UKGov at gov.uk/transition, which includes details of support and webinars across the UK government. And also for the Welsh Government at businesswales.gov.wales/EU-transition-portal. I think it's, if you go and look at Business Wales, Google Business Wales, you'll be able to find that link. Again, that one sets out support by Welsh Government. You've given us a really interesting and informative number of key points that businesses need to look into and adhere to. So we're very grateful for you today for doing that for us. I'm sure that you will all wish to thank Matthew Clark from PwC, and also thank the Secretary of State for Wales, Simon Hart, and Ken Skates, the Minister for Business and the Economy, who joined us earlier, for the collaborative way in which they addressed this crucial issue of our time. Can I thank you all for joining us, for being with us today, and wish you well in the coming weeks, and stay safe. Thank you all very much indeed.